join us for that. So I'm introducing Gary Stoneburner. He is currently at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. Has a very, very long history in cybersecurity and information security in relevant fields. He's also worked and really been a thought leader over the years at NIST. He was at Boeing. He was an Army signal officer. He's retired from the reserves, as well as the State Defense Force of Maryland. And I imagine that Maryland has some things in it. They might be a place that sees some activity at the state level. I am so excited that Gary accepted our invitation to come here because in my few hours getting to be around him in McLean, Virginia, kind of once a year, I have learned so much in such little time from you. So we live in a reality where cybersecurity expertise and experience are in short supply, and real cybersecurity wisdom that comes from years of working through these problems is very, very rare. So it was natural for me to want to bring Gary here and introduce him to our community. So thank you so much for coming. I'll turn it over.
Thanks, Greg. Obligatory start. It's me, not Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. These are the thoughts I had, and they're not my employers. Okay. So the idea for this was something that's been been thinking about for a while. We do stuff, and the stuff becomes its own reason for doing. So why are we doing what it is we're doing? A couple major sources. The first one, you guys have probably seen that if you've been in the area. It sort of came out from here. The second is a presentation I gave, and from which I just drew some basic concepts from that. So, critical thinking. That's the idea. Have you ever found yourself in front of a door and it won't open? It takes you a second to realize, oh, it's a hole. I won't ask if there's anyone who's ever sat there for a little while before it finally dawned on you. And going to that fountain of wisdom, Google, I thought this was not a bad definition of critical thinking. So, objective analysis, evaluation, something other than a casual just accepting. Why cybersecurity? You tell me. Anyone offer soundbite now? We only got a few minutes. Why cybersecurity? Anybody at all?
Why do we need critical thinking?
Why do we do cybersecurity?
Why do we do cybersecurity at all?
Because we produce products that don't have any security.
We have a sentence. Actually, just anything. Why do we do it? Just off the top of your head, what's a reason?
Make sure the mission.
Fair enough. Let's see how you did. Because we feel threatened. Now, right off the bat, you see the length of the slide. You see where that field on top? There's some stuff underneath it. Now, we didn't get a lot of response. That's okay. That's okay. So, who's doing the threatening? Wide range of reasons for doing it, down to a kid in his mom's basement. But how about some other threat sources? Your boss, shareholders, your sponsor. Do you do it because you're threatened by your sponsor? Why would we do it? Threatened by your sponsor, what would we call that? What kinds of things do we do?
Compliance.
Amen. So who's threatened? Our company? Shareholders? Individuals in the company? Is it my sponsor? My customer? Maybe you've already seen the one being threatened may have no control over the cybersecurity being performed. A lot of different people, organizations can be the ones threatened, multiple at the same time. Who's doing the threatening? There's a wide range of those, all in this category of feel threatened, because that's why. I do cybersecurity to achieve personal goals. These are valid goals. People actually have these, right? There's some other valid goals. I need to get my PhD. I do cybersecurity to get my PhD. Well, that's not a bad goal. To make money. Even seminar presenters. Key point here, there isn't a bad reason on this slide. They're all valid reasons. Now, they can be out of balance. One reason can be pushing others that should be of concern to a lesser state. But this is the kind of thing I want to lead you to, is that why we do cybersecurity, typically that very first bullet is the one that will come out. And only a subset of who's threatening and who is threatened. The others are not thought about, and yet they're realities in the world we live in. Reasons why cybersecurity is being done. Compare the what to the why. There's a set of stated whys. What are they? Takes time, effort to figure it out, because they're not always readily apparent. If they're de jure, they're documented someplace. But then there's a whole set of de facto. These often are not documented. And they can be different. Critical questioning is, how come? Now, perhaps you've already seen, as you just walked through cybersecurity, that the question of, what are we actually doing here? Is there something that's written down? Is there something that's de facto? Is there a difference, and why? Are questions that are not posed. There was too much time getting compliance done. Too much time, I have no remaining clock cycles after I've finished my penetrate and patch cycle. In fact, I never finish it. Why are they different? Maybe the de jure sounds better. So that's the one I write down. Maybe de jure is what we want to do, but we lost our way to get there. Started doing something else, and we sort of forgot what we really wanted to do. Maybe there was never the right motivation, pressures, culture to get us to where we wanted to go. Maybe the de jure is just plain wrong. It's a stated reason, but it's wrong. It's not what this organization needs. Critical thinking. So I'm outlining some things that I'd like you to put into your wheelhouse. And I'm going to suggest some first principles that can help us in determining the why. Okay, another critical thinking exercise for you. Does that make sense to you?
Can everybody read it? Or do we need barriers? Good.
Does it make sense to you? One nod. So you resonate with that?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. So here's my suggestion. You already resonated with it. To a large measure, we have a cybersecurity problem because we're depending on undependable software. We're using flawed software past its dependability. But much of the fix is adding more code. We call it cybersecurity code or security code, but it's more code nonetheless. Perhaps you see the problem. Let's expound upon this corollary. Doesn't matter what the code does, what its function is. That doesn't determine its dependability. But maybe you have seen this, where that's security code, and the environment around you just raises its expectation of goodness because it's security code. It must be better than the other code because it's security code. Well, the latent flaw rate, flaws per 1,000 line of code or function points or however you want to measure it, it's not depending on what it does. It's dependent on how it came to be. Being security code doesn't make it any more trustworthy. And the stuff is built, the same kind of processes that built the code, it's there to protect. Critical thinking. You resonated with that idea that we can't fix a problem due to flawed code by adding more flawed code. Before you heard that from me, had any of you already inculcated that into your thinking? He had. You had. Outstanding. That's two of, maybe some online as well, but it's two of.
I only have because Susan Sons told me so.
All right. Fair enough.
And proved it.
Most of us haven't. So someone brings it to our attention. So the cybersecurity programs you're a part of haven't inculcated either. So they become self-destructive. The attempt to improve things, we create larger and larger attack surfaces. It's not a path to success. That's where the first principles come in handy. But the critical thinking says, what are the first principles? How do they apply? The critical thinking says, why are we doing what we're doing? Rather than just accepting we're doing it. Because once you get to this point, you realize, hey, maybe we're making some fundamental errors in how we're approaching the problem space. But that doesn't, awareness doesn't happen until we start thinking critically about what's going on. Seven principles that Jackson, Russell, and Sons produced. Now, I note that these all focus on the implementation of cybersecurity. I'd like to take each one and extend it to its use in critical thinking about cybersecurity. You made up a word, comprehensivity, right?
Yeah. He made that up.
I captured for that, I tried to capture in just a few words, a basic gist of that principle. If I got it wrong, you guys just go ahead and correct me and we'll make it right. And then I took that and said, well, could we take this principle for implementing and ask ourselves, how would we use that, or could we use that? And I came up with the answer, yes, we can. To thinking about our problem space. Thinking critically about it. Not being critical, but being considerate of what's actually going on. And purpose to avoid being cynical about what's going on. It's real easy to be cynical. That's not the purpose of critical thinking. It's to help us achieve success, which that's something else we have to define. I don't have it explicit in the slide, but success is something that you may think everyone agrees on, but I suggest it's worth having some discussion. Wherever you're standing, success is probably related to what you're doing. And what I'm doing is helping something else happen. And that's the definition of success that I need to feed. And there could be several layers of that. Eventually get to like my organization, APL, succeeding. How do I help that happen? But you step back just a little bit and we can become myopic. In fact, we will. And it takes effort to not be. So to truly understand what's taking place, some deep but also broad. If I'm going to get the de jure and the de facto reasons for what we're doing, I'm going to have to look maybe at an organizational level to find out what the de jure reasons are. I'm going to have to look at the organizational culture to see what might be driving us to de facto reasons that are different. My suggestion to you is this is valuable, or otherwise we're like Sisyphus trying to push a rock up a hill. Keeps rolling down, and we can never figure out why. Well, there are very valid reasons why. I might disagree with them, but they exist. There's a rationale for their existing. I could disagree with some underlying principles upon which they're based. But too often we don't talk about those principles. We talk about the ramifications from them. Now, maybe in another context, political, sociological, the merging of religion and science, and all these areas that are fraught. And two intelligent people, they come together and they're talking. Each looks to the other like they've just grown a second head. They're stupid. How could they possibly do that? But they're talking about ramifications of belief and foundation and never get to those foundational differences. Well, that'll happen just as surely when you're trying to figure out why the de jure, why the de facto. There's some underlying reasons. And remember that slide earlier where I list all the reasons why you might do cybersecurity? Remember I said they're all valid. But they also represent a tension. This valid reason, that valid reason. I'm operating on this one. You're operating on that one. It looks like we're at loggerheads. Well, actually, there's a lot of commonality, but we don't see it. Our own little scope of why we do things. We're not asking the question, what are the whys? It's not all about me. Another example. There's nothing wrong with protecting your senior from harm, personal harm. That's a good thing to do, in fact. But it could be if that's the only thing we do. Don't give a rip about the shareholders. Don't give a rip about the customers. Don't give a rip about the country. Well, that's a problem. But it wasn't wrong to protect the senior from personal harm. Opportunity. If we want to succeed, it's not a bad idea to build on success. Let's say you agree that it's worthwhile differentiating the de jure and de facto whys. Where to start? How about where the difference is most obvious, most apparent, most distinct? Maybe that's a better place to start than some place where it's really hard to see the differences. Where are your resources? we want to move. Again, de jure and de facto are the same. Do we move de jure? Do we move de facto? Do they both move? Goal is what we say we do is what we do. We don't go do something else. It's implicit. Sir?
Just to make sure people are following, can you give an example of, can you share a real world example of a de jure why and a de facto why that might come into conflict with each other?
Sure. I have an organization wants to be the best in class for cybersecurity. That's their vision, their statement. The de facto is they're achieving minimal policy compliance. There's a reason for the de facto. You won't hear that stated at the organizational level. But they could say, our goal is to become best in class for cybersecurity, starting with assurance of compliance with these government standards. Got it. It can be said. But if it's not said, we probably won't achieve that best in class. Does that help? And you're not alone in this. It isn't that cybersecurity wise are completely disjoint from anything else that the organization wants to do. If they appear to be, then maybe that's a problem on us. Are we trying to achieve something the organization doesn't need? We think it should be done. I have more than once set myself back down, and it's not my job. I'm here to inform as a system security engineer, to allow the decision maker to make fully informed decisions. I can't even make them make such decisions. But I can encourage it. I can provide the information so they can. I can encourage you guys to think critically about the problem space and them. But they do have things they need, that they want. And what we're trying to do should align with those. But maybe our own de factos don't align. Maybe we're asking them to expend resources on something that really doesn't matter to what their business needs are. You'll certainly see that in compliance, where you got to do this compliance, and if someone says, well, but how does that affect our relationship with the adversary? Because that's what I'm really concerned about. And we might sheepishly answer, it doesn't. We need to do something entirely different to really protect our missions. And I think that that is coming back at us, even though they don't understand it. That's what's happening. Their gut's telling them this isn't really doing what we need to do, even though they don't understand the area as much as we're supposed to. Well, we can help them understand it and see the alignment. We're thinking critically. And we're doing it with some rigor. It's not scatterbrain. It's not just being critical. But our goal is to be accurate. To uncover what needs to be uncovered. Something that's consistent. One of the goals of education is intended to be critical thinking skills. I suspect that as you look at people coming into the workforce, critical thinking skills may be less than we would like them to be. So I'm encouraging you to think critically about cybersecurity. I'm also encouraging you to consider what level of critical thinking skills are you routinely applying around you. Because it's easy to expend our activity in the action we're being required to do. And then we don't have people who are, so to speak, looking beyond the foxhole to see what we should be doing. Sort of an analogy I like is, you're in the water, you fell off a boat and you're in the water, you can't get back to the boat and you've got to swim. Well, there's an island right there, pretty close, or there's a shore over there that's pretty far away. Would you like someone right at that point to tell you that there's a hungry lion on that island? Would you like to know that before you started swimming there? Well, who's thinking critically about the situation we're in that has the clock cycles to do it? It's like, close your swim, go. More is less. We want to affect change. Writing a research tome about the subject is probably not going to be as effective as making clear to the person you need to influence. So if we're trying to influence a decision owner, decision maker in a business, telling them all about servers and attack flows and buffer overflows and why? Who cares? I was in an exercise recently where we were merging cybersecurity with operations. In this exercise, we had the actual CIO of Maryland playing the exercise. He was playing himself and the treasurer of Maryland. And the question before the treasurer was, should I write checks because of the cyber stuff that's going on in my system? What information did the cyber folks feed up to him? Server 12 is compromised, they're using this flow, they're doing this, that, that. No way the treasurer could make a decision. Wasn't information was useful to him at all. So as we're expressing the why of cybersecurity, tell them why in some context that makes sense. Now that may not be your thing. It's not the thing of technologists typically. So you may need to find someone else. But I will tell you this, if there's no one else there, it's you. Even though you want to do cool stuff with technology, that's true. If you're the one, you're the guy, you're the gal, and you want your company to succeed, you want your organization, you want the mission to succeed, you're the one, then you have to relay it to the mission owner. There are resources to help. The talk I'm giving here today already resonates with some people in the room. So this is not an entirely new topic. You're not alone. But if you're the one on the scene, then it's on you. To do it, get help. Throwing words at somebody is not the answer. Concise, clear. It'll take some time because it's not typically what technologists are trained to do. Then it turns out no one is. So here's a thought.
It's definitely not what lawyers are trained to do.
Forget lawyers. At any rate, so here's an idea. Who engineers our mission process? Not the information system we're going to use in that process, but the process itself. Are we going to have 3 information systems? 2 information systems and a manual override switch? Information system and an alternate manual process? What's that look like? I just described a system. The mission process is a system. What do we call the system engineer that works on designing systems? I expect to hear nothing. I don't have a title for it. So who do they, oh, we'll get our system security engineer to come do that. What's the first word in system security engineering? Somebody say it. System. When we say that, what do we mean? What kind of system do we mean when we say system security engineering? Put 10 system security engineers in the room and say, what kind of system are you engineering? What do you think they'll say?
The two that I think of are information systems and weapon systems.
How many will say, I'm engineering how we process, how we fight our battle space? 0. Don't have a title for it. And so the people we bring in, they come in with a totally different perspective, if we do bring them in at all. So no one engineers our mission process from a security perspective. We don't have security aware, security tolerant mission processes. We try to get the tolerance, the security awareness into an information system, a component of a larger system. It's really a bit of a step away from the specifics on the slide, but it comes back to compartmentalization in that you have to focus on what you can impact. But as I said, if there's no one else there, and yes, you're the information system focus, it behooves you, I suggest, to look at yourself. Yes, I'm doing cybersecurity for an information system, or I'm the systems engineer for this system, supporting that engineer, but nonetheless, my system, as complex as it is also a component. I need to get this in my mind that I am also a component engineer. But there I use an interesting word. In cybersecurity, my personal experience has been the vast number of individuals in cybersecurity are not engineers. And the ones who are math and scientists have a hard time engineering. They want mathematically precise results. And this is not a field where we have them. But it is a field that we can effectively engineer in. We talked about this last night. So if you are in the place where you're assigning tasks, and you assign what has a huge engineering component to it to non-engineers, and they don't produce what you want, whose fault is that? If I did the assignment, it's mine. I look at the cybersecurity workforce, and a lot of it is not positioned by expertise and experience to engineer solutions. So we get a lot of tick marks. We get a lot of point solutions, which, by the way, in their implementation, quite often don't remember that first principle. So they abstract away the reason their point solution is needed, flawed software, and don't include producing high-quality software as a part of their point solution. So when their point solution functions as intended, it is a good solution. But it's the implementation that has to function, not the idea. And then implementation, again, implemented with low assurance IT. Implementation that will be subjected to an adversary. So the point solution needs a point solution. And we just never get out of the cycle. Who engineers the mission process? How do we engage engineering in cybersecurity? What is it we're actually doing? Does it have a hope of achieving the de jure that we say we want to do? If you start down a path of seeking to think critically about the world around you, it behooves you to expect to be wrong. Start off proactively, willingly receiving critical thinking coming back to you. In fact, I would say this is an essential part of critical thinking. I'm not thinking critically if criticism cannot be received. I'm not thinking critically if I don't encourage it, which I do right now. It's not a very talkative audience. That's okay. But I truly am open to hearing, how could this idea so far be improved? This relates to a previous principle. Tailor it. You have so much effort. Put it where it do the most good. What mission is the most important? If harm would cause the most harm, good place to look first. I'll note that build on success, that mission might not be the one. Be aware of that. There are places where critical thinking will be received. There are other places where it won't, within your own organization. I encourage you to seek to build on success rather than butt your head against the wall on the first one you come to. Now, whatever you do, how you do it matters. I mentioned earlier, there's something we're trying to influence. We do the critical thinking for a purpose. It's not just so that I see de jure and I see de facto. What good is that? I'd like to make a positive difference. See, that's one of my goals for doing cybersecurity. I want to make a positive difference. I've been very frustrated. It's a career field that's frustrating. But it's also one where I've seen the potential to make a change. I've had in my career, I've had the privilege of suggesting text that's now federal standard. Employed that specific text in civil, DOD, and intelligence community. I lost some of that capability when I came to work for APL. Being a contractor, that's what happened. I have also seen where things I helped craft went sideways. And be a part of trying to change that. I have been in places where someone in the audience tried to tell the author what he meant, which is not generally a good idea. I fully received the words you wrote, I read this way, and if that's a valid reading, then that's on me. But if they read it and it doesn't say that, but they know what I meant, I've had it happen. It's like, no, I didn't mean that. That's a part of the critical thinking of the world we're really in. The blinders that are on are so tight. We're writing this stuff at NIST. We couldn't get it published if we didn't have the baseline. For reasons I've already said. The information assurance, the information security teams didn't have any engineers in them. They came from the security office, and what they did was policy. So it had to look like they could do something with it. We had to produce the baseline, or we couldn't publish it. So what did we do? Here are the baselines, and here very clearly is how you use them as the starting point, not the end point. put it on. And then we had people coming back at us, and they'd ask questions, say, well, did you read chapter 3, which tells you how to use the baselines? I mean, it's only like that thick. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, it's really thin. Oh, no. Well, you have to read. Okay, they didn't read it. All right, here's what we'll do. So right at the header of the section on baselines, we put in bold, read chapter 3 before you use these. I didn't work either. Well, that's the world we have to be a part of and work in. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, I think we've got students and people who are newer to the field, and so that specific example, I think, is a really important one that some of us definitely understood what you were saying. But can you talk a little bit more about the specific example with what do you mean by the baselines?
Sure.
Came out of this. Just
Absolutely.
like a little history on that.
I can.
If anybody's not following.
Starts with FISMA 2002. Congress said, we're going to help. And whenever you hear that, you start running away. NIST, you shall. They put shalls on this in public law. You shall tell us what to do. I'm sorry. Well, so what did we do? We produced a federal information processing standard categorizing your system, which meant, and we wrote, again, if some of these people who use it would actually read it, they'd come to a different conclusion. It says, look at your system and come to a conclusion of the worst case harm that could result. The intention being, and we should have been more clear about this, there are no security controls. The worst adversary does it at the worst possible time. What could happen? And rank it. Low, moderate, high. Low, harm. Moderate, serious harm. High, severe or catastrophic. Big buckets. All right, fine. Then we wrote a FIPS 200, which listed required security, but it just listed titles like audit, access control. What's the things you should consider? In some ways, it's like the new cybersecurity framework out of NIST. Doesn't have anything to do any of these things, but just gives you areas you should cover. That's what that is. And then we produced a control catalog. We scratched our heads here some because we're technologists. We can't tell anyone what the right risk is they should be willing to accept. Moreover, the right risk for this mission that we're going to conduct tomorrow, and a whole bunch of people could die if we don't do this, or that mission, which is years in the future against a different kind of adversary, what's the right amount of risk? They're not the same. Even with exactly the same situation, two different decision makers will come to different answers because risk is inherently subjective. That's not a cybersecurity determination. That is just what risk is. We saw that and said, as technologists, we cannot answer that question. So we'll provide a catalog. We'll provide you a process for taking the catalog after you've figured out what you need to do, going through it, and ending up with a set of controls that will do what you decided you needed to do. Well, baseline. One for low, some harm. Moderate, it could be serious harm. High, severe catastrophic. The intent? Well, instead of a blank sheet of paper, start with those baseline set of controls. Now, what you may not know about the controls is they are purposefully vague. Some are complete statements. Even there, it's like a title rather than they're not specs. Others have blanks in them. Purposeful blanks, where you have to put something in the blank on purpose. And in the last rev of the control document, something I was able to get inserted was you have to also be willing to change the text of the control. to express your purpose for the control in this control set. So what we're producing is a set of mutually related controls to achieve a purpose. Our big failing was we didn't talk more about the purpose. And when you read the, quote, Risk Management Framework, RMF, as it got produced, initially it was in that document because there was no other place to put it. Then it got its own document, was pulled out of there and put in its own document. This purpose, it just magically appeared. There was no discussion about how it appeared. What was a good purpose? What was a bad purpose? Didn't say anything. So what happened? Over time, because this was the easy thing to do, the purpose became implement a baseline. That's your purpose? The purpose wasn't to assure I don't go bankrupt. The purpose wasn't to assure my sponsor is happy with my level of performance. None of that. Is to implement a baseline, a set of controls. Well, here's a thought experiment for you. So here's your requirement. You are to implement the moderate baseline. You heard that requirement? That's the 100% of the requirement. Right? What information did I give you to tell you how to fill in the blanks? What did you say? None. Zippo, none. That is the most common requirement today. And that's 100% of the information that goes with it. It's a broken system. Yes?
It should explicitly say that the catalog is called NIST 800.
It is NIST Special Publication 800-53. It's in Rev 4, it's in Rev 5 is either out for public review or about to. So the process got broken. They're going to take the baselines, and instead of having them in 853, they're going to move them to a separate document. I don't think it really fixes the issue, because we really don't want people to use the baselines as a requirement set. Let's go back to what I said about categorization. What's the worst case harm that could happen? It said nothing about will it happen. It said nothing about the protections you have in the place to mitigate that or make it less likely. Nothing at all. The worst case is the absolute worst case. So the worst case is catastrophic. Well, this sits inside a mission process. What do I need to have in the information system inside this specific mission process, which has its own protection? Maybe a lot less than the high baseline. So saying the categorization level is not giving you the cybersecurity requirement, it's giving you one piece of information towards determining it. Because I also haven't figured out what risk I'm going to accept. Yeah, catastrophic, and I accept the risk. I don't do anything. No patrol whatsoever. Unlikely, but hey, maybe. The point is, it didn't say it.
I'm assuming that it wasn't intended that the FIPS high classification necessarily means 853 high baseline.
The way the process is written, you will start with that baseline. But the process is you can tailor out as much as you want. So you reach your security goals for the information system.
And you could reach that with a low baseline.
You might. The process is start with a high and tailor things away, rather than start with a low and tailor them up. But the point is you can get to the same thing. One other thing that I've gotten the folks at NIST to agree with is that a highly trustworthy implementation of the low baseline arguably gives you more security capability than a typical implementation of the high baseline, which puts the baselines into a huge perspective. The implementation matters. Do I put this control in or that control? In some cases, it doesn't really matter that much. It's a holistic set. It's not any different than looking at a requirements document for, let's say, a database. and oh, I'm going to take that one requirement out. Does the whole thing fall apart? Well, not necessarily. But it's a collection of requirements that come together to achieve what you want. Oh, is there a template? I just do the template every time I want to do a database for any organization, for any purpose? No, that doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work for security either. You know, funny look on your face.
So the fact that auditors or whoever have taken 853 in the baseline and just said, look, this other risk management stuff, no, here you go. Right, you categorize, and then you need to do all these things, and we'll look down on variation from the baseline. That's like, I tend to criticize that as sort of RMF as applied, right? It wasn't, you convinced me it's not in RMS DNA, but it's what happened when it hit the world. Another
I always say RMS DNA, it's not surprising that happened.
Well, so the other criticism that I've heard and I've made, because I've given a lot of talks about why RMS sucks, and some of them are actually entitled that, is that it's just too difficult to do. To do it right, to really do risk management around this and really take this catalog of controls and make all the decisions, not just to build up a security program, but to decide what to tailor away and what to change. But there's not enough expertise in the world to do that on a system-by-system basis.
What we need is heuristics we don't have. Like in architecture, there are heuristics. And there's actually value in saying you have the system architect, even IT, and the system engineer. Architects work with a lot of heuristics. That's why they do it. We don't have those yet. They would be very valuable. But part to answer your question for the now, we can come with this idea. Let's quickly think about the now. What can we do? We don't have the capability to engineer a cybersecurity solution. Unfortunately, that's simply the case in a lot of companies, in a lot of organizations. We're doing good just to make the baseline requirement and try to do that. That's a reality. How do I use such a thing developed in that reality in a mission process so I can trust that my business will succeed? So first step is, that's a reality we need to deal with, like the stuff that's implementing now. Put it in a reasonable context for what I can expect from it. Do critical thinking on what are reasonable expectations based upon such things as Craig just mentioned. How do I use that in a manner? There's another disconnect. Maybe, again, critical thinking. If you go back to the documentation that talks about the federal enterprise architecture, have any of you ever heard of enterprise architectures? All right. You go back to the initial description of them, and it's how you architect the manner in which the business is conducted. That evolved into enterprise architectures for IT. That's a devolution. That's the word. It evolved. That's not an advancement.
You're allowed to make up words here.
Okay, I just made up a word. Anyway, we lost the idea that first we design how our organization is going to function. That's our enterprise architecture. And IT to support that. I walked into an organization, will be unnamed a while back, many years ago in fact, and I went in to say, where's the enterprise architecture being designed in their IT organization? There was no tie to how that organization conducted its mission. An enterprise architecture for that. Nowhere to put in a mission that is architected from a security-aware point of view. That's a risk-aware mission process. There's some things we cannot do at the back end, inside an information system. Critical thinking to understand what we can do. And as a component engineer, the questions I need to push up to the system engineer for an answer.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a fully formed question, so I'm going to kind of do it on the fly. But I've been just thinking about this concept of if we're taking risk-based approaches, that there's going to be someone who has to make the decision. And from a sort of like human psychology perspective, that person is always going to be worried about, well, one, what if I get it wrong? And two, what if I get it right, but I can't prove it to anyone that it was the right decision when something bad happens?
Yep.
Because you can make the right call and something bad still happens. And it was risk-based. And it seems like the natural progression of RMF was for people to try to push that risk-making, that risk determination onto someone else. I mean, this is particularly true in maybe like public office where you're worried, I might get, voted out of office, next time or something. And so if they can say, I did the thing that someone else told me I had to do, like that's the risk-based determination, is, NIST made it for me. It wasn't me, I did the right thing. And that, it's a whole lot of CYA in a lot of ways.
But you have defined a purpose for doing cybersecurity, and it is risk-based. You called it CYA.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing down here in the trenches, you say, why am I doing this? There's a reason. And he gave one that is actually happening all the time. It's still risk-based, right? But the other thing is, I find we're doing risk-based. You are? What risk? Well, that's the only one, possibly. The only threat agent you've ever mentioned is the authorizing official. So you're doing risk-based, but you're not talking about a foreign nation or a competitor. The only threat you've got is yourself. Your sponsor's your threat. If that's what you want to do, that's not what you said you wanted to do. That's not what you said you wanted to do. Look at laws. Look at all the stuff that's happening in our political realm. What is the reason the dialogues got started and are being maintained? Bad guys. Real bad guys. How many times in a cybersecurity dialogue that's occurring in our society did you hear someone say, cybersecurity? Yeah, there'll be a flood. How many times have you heard that? Well, why is water damage from flooding in the cybersecurity set of things to do? It's never part of the dialogue that got the cybersecurity program started, or the dialogue that maintains it. Why are we doing what we're doing? Sometimes you can't fix it, but other times you can. And in either case, to understand what's going on around you, I suggest it's a good thing for you to do. You can be more proactive and more helpful if you understand.
I have a ton of questions, but do other folks have questions before I ask another one? You talked about, there are some things you can't do after the fact, right? That means that cybersecurity literate or aware, if not super experts, need to be involved in engineering systems and platforms and stuff from the start, or nearer to the start, right?
Yes, and I'd like, before you go further, expert kind of thing. I know I'm breaking it, but just a quick break. Now, it's what I presented today in the category of too hard for the average individual coming out of Indiana University to comprehend. Had you heard it before? Some of you have, some of you maybe. But the point is, it doesn't take a lot of expertise. It just takes it being applied.
So my question is, my sense is that in the, at least in the defense community, because I'm more familiar with that there is not a tradition of having cybersecurity expertise directly involved in the acquisition process and in the early phases of building.
Oh, it's still non-existent.
Well, and so,
Well, it's not.
I'm interested. I know it's not non-existent, but I'm curious.
I'll explain what I meant by that.
I'm curious about your perspective on why that is, because it seems sort of obvious. A lot of things seem obvious after you're saying, but secondly, is that going to change, or is the uphill battle to get security people into the design of things too difficult, socially or policy-wise, to make happen?
There is indication, and I've been as part of the dialogue, that at the DoD level, there's a process called JCID, where they build systems, and they determine what gaps there are in mission capabilities, how we're going to meet the gap, and if necessary, spawn an acquisition program. And in that process, there was no placeholder for mission-related cybersecurity requirements. There was no one who had the job to do that. There was no placeholder for it. Cybersecurity has been defined as something that starts at a security control level with a definition of a baseline. So as I said, that's based upon one factor of a decision of what you need to do. What's the worst case harm, which is not the actual case you expect. And even if you have the actual case, it doesn't define what you feel you need to do about it. But it was used as definitive, the moderate requirements. I raise my hand as this author and say, what moderate requirements? I don't know them. Anyway, so that's why it started there. And when I said it's not being done, up at the high level, there's a mission gap. One of the things to do early on is an analysis of alternatives, ways of fixing that gap. Too often, they're trading off different information systems. They're not asking the question, how are we going to conduct the mission? If we choose to do it this way with this information system, what cyber defense requirements does that impose on my mission? If I did my mission a different way, I'd have different cyber defense requirements. Can I achieve those requirements with that mission definition? So I have to do some forward thinking. I have to get an Orange Book A1 system, which means it has no flaws. It was built by the Soviets, and I still trust it. Or I can use off-the-shelf copies. Well, it's non-existent. They don't ask those questions. They get done with that process, a process that probably presumed too much cybersecurity capability in the information system, more than I can actually achieve. Then they got down into the acquisition program with a set of security controls as the requirement, not mission requirement, which has several ramifications. So if you get a loss or a lack of funding, there's never overfunding typically. So now I have to trade off a requirement that is based on a specific mission need with a requirement that's based on a policy need for me to control set. Which one do you think wins? The one based on policy or the one based on explicit mission need? All the time, every time. So that's one thing. So the other thing is there's no definition of how secure does it need to be. It says be secure. You will not make a secure system. Get it in your heads right now. Not going to happen. You can make a system that's secure enough, depending on what the enough is. But it begs the question, what is enough? So as you go forward and you're working in this field, you get a requirement and you will, at this point, be secure. Recognize that's a non-requirement. You can't be secure. You might be secure enough, which begs the question, hey boss, how secure does it need to be? I can't be secure. Now, I'll warn you, you might get the kind of feedback, well, if you can't do it, I'll find someone who can. No? Figure out how you're going to handle that. But to me, as a former Army officer, it's like saying, Lieutenant, go take that hill. I can't, sir. I'll find another lieutenant. In some cases, that's the case. All right, I got a really good rifle platoon. And on that hill is an entire mechanized infantry division. A pretty good one, too. Sir, I don't care how many lieutenants you fire. The platoon's not taking that hill. We're almost in that situation. I cannot be secure, but I can be secure enough. What's enough?
So that goes back to my question. Are we going to see the security, the security awareness and advice appear in this mission planning phases and the design phases like safety does?
I think it's starting there, but it's not very far along. Right? There was, and unfortunately, the right people have to be engaged at the right time. So there were some others with me who were engaged at the DoD level on a project, and we started to make inroads with J6. That's the signal folks up there, and they recognized that, hey, you know, we're not really making any requirements. We really should be doing that. Right, so that program ended. We left, and I don't know who came back, if anyone came back. So there's been this hit and miss, right? Critical thinking, you guys can be change agents. Let me finish up real quick. So here's what I'm hoping you will do. What are the real whys? Not what's stated, but actually you look at what's doing. What's that de facto? So you say that's the why? There's something wrong about this. Or what is it really? And once we find out what the whys are, how can we get them done most effectively? Because it's easy to spend a lot more time than we need to. Always do a little bit more, but this is the biggie, okay? The actions become the purpose. We may measure our cybersecurity for how many actions we perform instead of the effect on the adversary. My son, Chris, red teamer at APL, came up with a statement that I really liked. We may be in danger of moving from woefully inadequate to not good enough. So we give ourselves gold stars. We made a big increase in our cybersecurity. So this will have been a success if you leave here with that first one. What you actually do with it, and you seek to be change agents in the little microcosm, big microcosm, wherever you are. Should do one more. Oops. Let's try that one. There we go. Push the wrong button. Now I have a final thought on the value of why. Have you found out why? Any last questions? Well, thank you.
Yeah, so thanks Gary for coming. And don't forget, what is it, April 18th is our next talk. So thanks for joining us. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah.
This is your lunch guy.
No, right there. Hi. Hi, Chloe.